Today's show is made possible through the support of mirrortalk.ai, the AI reflection tool that has my students talking. Hello, this is Vicki Davis with the Cool Cat Teacher Talk Show, where we talk to classroom teachers and educators around the world about what matters now in the classroom. Today, we're talking about artificial intelligence in education. So on today's show, we're going to talk to classroom teacher Steve Dembo, who did an interesting experiment in his classroom to determine who can write a better paper, ChatGPT, students, or a combination of both. And the answer may surprise you. We're also going to talk to some college professors about what they're doing to change their assignments based on the fact that many college students were using AI-generated responses in their discussion boards. We're going to talk about some good uses of AI in the classroom and about AI ethics, including the Eliza effect with educator Tom Mullaney. Finally, we're going to wrap up with some of my favorite AI tools, and as always, we'll include what I'm doing in my classes, including how we're using AI in my AP classroom, and what I'm doing to make sure that students actually do know how to code in Python. Stay tuned. It's time for Cool Cat Teacher Talk.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
So first, let's talk about AI with a simple background, like I like to share with my students and teachers at my school. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary says that AI is the capability of computer systems or algorithms to imitate intelligent human behavior. Now, that is a key word, imitate. First, AI has been around for quite some time, and you've probably used it even though you didn't know it. Simple machine learning started with spell check, and then it offered to help you rephrase things. And algorithms determine what next video you might want to watch on YouTube. And AI is working when you talk to your Siri or Alexa device. It's also working when you use those filters on FaceTime or Snapchat. Everybody started talking about AI, though, when OpenAI released something called ChatGPT November 30th, 2022, because it could imitate humans so well. The G stands for generative, which means it generates answers based on your prompts. The P stands for pre-trained. It was trained by reading everything on the internet, both the good and the bad, text, videos, podcasts, and more. And the T in GPT stands for transformer, which means that it transforms each time it answers a question, and each answer is unique. If you ask it the same thing twice, it may give you a similar answer, but not the exact same answer. Now, this is a really important point for parents and for teachers. You can't copy something that someone has written and paste it into ChatGPT and ask, "Did you write this?" That is not how it works. It's not keeping up what it's generated with other people and then sharing it with you. It's not really going to do that. So, for example, I had one of my students when ChatGPT first came out in January 2023, he took an essay that he had written when he was in 9th grade. Now, this young man was a senior in high school. It would not be possible that this essay would be anywhere except on his teacher's desk. And he typed it in and asked ChatGPT if it wrote the essay. Well, it actually claimed that it wrote his essay. And when he rebuked it and said, "No, you didn't write it. This is mine," it quickly said, "No, I didn't write it." So it's not something you can do to go and say, "ChatGPT, did you write something or not?" That is not how it works. And AI detectors do not work. I just wish everyone would understand that. So a big part of what we'll discuss is what can we do because AI detectors don't work. Now, some people ask, can ChatGPT be blocked? Well, if you look on Google or Microsoft Copilot, you will see a summary at the top of your search now, and that is generative AI. I do want to note that generative search at the top of Google, I do not allow my students to use or cite that. They would have to take a screenshot. And one of my rules is that if they use artificial intelligence, they have to cite it. And I prefer the original source of information. So I want them to read the original source because original sources are always treated with preference versus something that is generated by AI, because AI can easily have flaws. Until Google can let us cite that generative box, that is not something any student should ever be copying from. For this reason, I've had my students using Perplexity.ai. Now, I know that Perplexity.ai and many of these other sources have been in trouble with authors who they have copied and ingested that information already. And that is kind of an ongoing issue that we have to discuss. So, Google Slides and Canva and now PowerPoint can offer to help you design your presentations. And tools like Brisk Teaching will even create a presentation for you. But you know what? Just like when the internet came out and every company moved onto the internet, every company in school is pretty much going to use artificial intelligence in some way. So, when the Gutenberg printing press came out and the Industrial Revolution happened and then the internet all shook up our world, AI is going to do the same thing. But I want to be clear. I believe you can be an ethical and moral person and use AI wisely. We have to know that AI is not neutral. It will be used for good or bad, depending on the intent and practices of companies and people using them. And that's what this show is all about in particular. So now is a perfect time for us to talk about AI with Jason Thacker, author of The Age of AI, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Humanity. This interview is taken from episode 684 of my podcast, the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. What is artificial intelligence and what is it not?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about AI, what it can and can't do. And often our ideas of AI are driven more by Hollywood and scripts and novels and these kind of futuristic stories than they are about reality. But simply put, AI is the ability of a machine to make complex decisions. It's based on math. I mean, at the end of the day, this isn't kind of some mysterious algorithm that we don't understand in many ways. It is math. It's an algorithm. It's making a calculation based on various data, and it makes important decisions that make our life a lot easier. We often trust these AIs to make various decisions because they're typically right. But what happens if they're wrong, and what kind of impact does that have? And these are really important kind of ethical questions that we need to be thinking about when we use these technologies and develop them.
Can AI algorithms have bias or discriminate?
Yes, they definitely can. And the reason is because they're created by fallible people. They're created by people who have bias and discrimination. And we all have blind spots. We don't always understand why we make the decisions we make. And when these systems are created based on the data inputs that are given to them in terms of training data, if there's any kind of skew in the data or an issue with the data, the algorithm can make a bad decision. And often those are very innocuous decisions, very lighthearted, not a big deal. If your phone app incorrectly labels your face as somebody else, that's not a big deal. But when you start using these in higher stakes situations where they're making either life or death decisions, or they're making decisions that are going to impact someone's future, or their financial abilities and things like that, when these AIs are making various decisions that are impacting other people's lives.
Well, you know, AI, they're the gatekeepers now when you're trying to apply for a job. And if people know how the AI works, they can get a lot of job interviews. And then you've got people that don't and can't get any.
We're starting to use AI everywhere. We're using it every single day, from our phones to our communication devices, social media, to defense applications, to medicine, just a host of different applications. And there's some really high-stake decisions that are being made, whether it's in terms of national security and issues of war, but even in terms of, as you mentioned, like a home loan application or a job application. AIs can really assist in these things because they can help decipher, they can help weed out maybe not qualified applicants and stuff. But what happens if that AI makes a decision and it excludes women or excludes minorities from various job applications based simply on the fact that they're a minority or a woman? That's not okay. That's a discrimination that we want to make sure we're weeding out. But often we trust these decision makers, these AIs, to make these decisions, and we distrust the outcome. And that's where we need to have a level of transparency, knowing that there is certain bias and discrimination that can be present in these devices, even if we don't recognize it. There's a certain level of responsibility as human beings. These are tools. These are not something greater than a tool. It's something that we're to use and wield with wisdom. And so as we step into these technologies and start utilizing them more and more, there needs to be a level of transparency. Transparency not only in how they're working and the companies understanding how they're put together, but also having public debate about where do we want to use these technologies? Do we want our police force to have these tools that can be extremely beneficial for solving crimes and catching criminals? But if it yields a false positive or it yields no results, that could also hurt someone. And so we need to be really wise and realize that we're the ones called to step into using these tools with responsibility and with thoughtfulness and mindfulness of their uses and also their drawbacks. And that's something that I write about a lot in the book, is having this balanced approach, is that there are very good applications, but there are also very dangerous applications. We need to speak in wisdom, and we need to have robust public debate over these tools and how we want to use them in our lives, because they're increasingly controlling many, if not all aspects of our life in some form or fashion.
I was on Facebook the other day and an educator said, hey, somebody wrote this algorithm that will go through all of my friends on Facebook and tell me who supports this particular political candidate or this person who's in politics. So I can go unfollow all of them. Whether they have publicly said they follow this person or not, this algorithm supposedly will figure out who does and who doesn't. And then I saw people on the other side who said, oh, and this person wrote this. Well, A, nobody knows who wrote the algorithm. B, the algorithm wouldn't tell you if you were on the list or not, so you could refute it. So there was no transparency. And C, people were blindly following this to determine their friends list and who they were going to talk to based on some algorithm that nobody knew anything about. I mean, that doesn't seem educated to me, Jason. It just doesn't.
And it doesn't. And it can be extremely problematic because these tools can be used in ways to reinforce or kind of buttress up our bias or our own discrimination or create these echo chambers. And that's something that we need to be really aware of when we use these tools, is that we need to be thoughtful about how we're using them, but also be wise to say there may be drawbacks here. These things may not be perfect. Often, because they are technology, there are issues with them. There are problems with them. They're not always maybe working the way that we always think they will. And so we need to be thinking about how we trust these things, kind of the level of responsibility we do give them, but then also kind of being mindful of, we want to have robust public debate. We can enter into discussions with people who don't agree with us on every single political item, recognizing their dignity and value as a fellow human being.
Thank you, Jason Thacker, for explaining the responsibility we all have as humans supervising AI and the importance of the respectful debates we all need to have about the roles and responsibility of artificial intelligence in our lives. There's a lot of negative press surrounding AI, but I'd like to share some examples of some positive uses of applications of AI in our world today. The World Economic Forum says that by 2025, that 85 million jobs will be displaced because of AI, but that 97 million new jobs will be created with humans using AI. So I want my students and teachers to know the appropriate uses of artificial intelligence. Now, at some point, all of us will become supervisors of AI tools in our jobs. And here's just a few ways that AI is helping our world today. So when ChatGPT came out, people started putting what was in their pantry in the box and asking what recipes they could make with it. And busy moms used to come up with ideas for their son's superhero birthday party. And so it was kind of like parlor tricks. And in some ways on social media, it still is. But many companies are using AI for accounts payable and receivable clerks. One company I worked with 5 years ago used to take 3 months to pay me. And since they automated low-level processing, it takes 5 days for me to get paid. I love that, but they also get paid faster too. An interesting story from Home Depot. Their employee of the year a few years ago took an AI tool, and instead of it taking 2 weeks to forecast sales, the AI could do it in 2 hours and added millions of dollars to their bottom line. Many people use AI to take notes in meetings, and it will send a quick email with the meeting notes and action items immediately after the meeting is done. Again, you need to supervise. The medical field is using AI to help them read x-rays and MRIs faster and more accurately. And in manufacturing, they're putting in cobots, which do repetitive human tasks and work alongside humans. And for me, I can teach Python programming faster than ever before, and I really like that. I also like how AI can help me with rubrics to generate questions for YouTube videos and help me do work faster. In Google Classroom, I can have a test and then pull it into a practice set that students can practice. I can use so many tools now for what's called formative assessment, which is the type of assessment that we do when knowledge is forming. My personal goal is to check for understanding about every 8 minutes because I want to make sure that all of my students are understanding the concepts I am teaching. And AI tools are especially helpful for me in doing that. I'm also excited about Meta's new AI model that translates up to 100 languages. So you might be able to go talk in English and others will hear in their language and vice versa. I do want to add that actually this makes human translators who can verify the accuracy of these tools even more important. So it will be even more valuable to speak multiple languages than ever before in a world where we have AI tools to help us translate. But we need to stress something, even as we talk about the good uses of AI. When I write about AI, I also talk a lot about HI, or human intelligence. I have to warn all of us that if you don't have human intelligence in a topic, that using AI is very unwise because you won't be able to catch its mistakes. AI imitates humans in all of our mistakes, flaws, and many of our good traits too. But you know what? Just as hammers and axes were used by our ancestors to build amazing cities and aqueducts and roads, they were also used to kill each other. AI is a tool that humans must rule. You can ask my students, and I say that all the time. And we are accountable for what artificial intelligence does. Everybody's talking about prompt engineering, but I think we need to be talking about safety engineers, especially when working with children. We must supervise AI. We also need to know that nobody can lay blame on an AI tool. The humans creating AI are accountable and responsible for what AI does under its supervision. So for this reason, every AI tool must be monitored and have what we call, for a lack of a better word, a kill switch if it is doing harm. Also, AI is a tool. Siri and Alexa, they are not a he or a she. Siri is an it. Alexa is an it. Children have a hard time with understanding what is real. In a research study, they had a robot interacting with 9, 12, and 15-year-olds. Children have a hard time with understanding what is real. It talked to them, and the robot interacted with them. And at the end of the day, researchers put the robot in the closet. When the robot in the closet called for help, the children were very disturbed because they thought the robot had feelings and they thought the robot was trapped and needed to be out. We have to be so careful not to use AI in a way to manipulate children and adults, but especially our children who do not know the difference. AI imitates humans, but we must set boundaries that AI should never misrepresent itself to children. Second, you can tell AI to use a particular viewpoint or knowledge base, but you need to have that viewpoint or knowledge base and be qualified to supervise it in that way. I know how to program in Python, therefore I'm capable of supervising the AI output used by my students. I have some other languages I do not know. It would be a mistake for me to try to teach those languages until I had an expertise and I could supervise and use it. even if AI can write in those languages. Third, back when I was a teenager, we all had the World Book Encyclopedia, and a teacher could tell if a student had copied from it by opening up her copy. That is not the case anymore. Our challenge, though, is that kids can find the right answer, but we have to make sure they have the right process for solving the problem. They have to know how to work the math problem, how to do the science experiment, how to outline and write the essay. And if we have to be honest here, that's one of the biggest problems about photomath. Parents will use photomath, or students will use photomath to get the answers, but they don't use it to see the process to solve the problem. The goal is to be able to solve the problem, not just get the answers. If you only get the answers, you're missing the point. And I think this is something we've inherited from the pandemic. If you look at photomath, it became the #1 app when all the kids went home to go to school. But we've got to get recentered on how students know how to do the process of things. As I work with companies, I keep telling them that AI has to know when to help students and when to coach kids with productive struggle. The old adage, you reap what you sow, is true. I always ask students when I introduce my AI unit, can you cheat yourself? And they always say, yes, you can. You can cheat yourself out of an education if you're overly dependent on AI. They're thinking about it, and we need to be thinking about it too. And you know what? Schools that don't have AI policies are deceiving themselves. It's everywhere. We have to actively change how we teach. As I was talking to my 8th graders last year about the appropriate use of AI, one student said to me, if my generation doesn't shape up, if I ever need brain surgery, I'm going to have to find a really old doctor. We need our kids to level up and learn more than we did and to become better doctors, not people that have depended overly on AI and don't know how to solve the problems. So now that we've had an introduction to this very broad topic, we're going to talk to the Director of Digital Innovation of the Western Springs School District, founder and CEO of Teach 42, and a Skokie School District board member, my friend Steve Dembo. This interview is taken from episode 802 of my podcast, the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, an experiment with ChatGPT and writing papers.
So we wanted to sort of test out not just whether people could identify whether something was written by bot or not. That's what a lot of people are doing is they're just saying, like, here's 5 papers. Can you figure out which one ChatGPT did? Mm-hmm. All right, that's all well and good. The question is, as a tool, can this help make you a better writer or not? Does the work that it put out, is it comparable to the work that you would normally do as a student or not, and so on? So we split up the class into 4 groups. We chose a topic that they were already familiar with, something that they read in language arts. One group was assigned to just write the paper, a 1-page paper, the way they normally would, using Google, using Grammarly, using whatever resources they normally would use, but to write it the traditional way. Second group, they were allowed to use ChatGPT. We were specifically using ChatGPT just to make sure that everything was comparable. And they were allowed to use it for any part of the pre-writing process. So they could use it to get ideas, to get an outline, to find resources, to identify quotes, to get a hook for their paper, and so on and so on. Any part of the pre-writing process they wanted, but then they had to write it themselves. And once they wrote it, they couldn't use ChatGPT anymore. Third group was post-writing. So they had to write it by hand, write it the traditional way, but then they could use ChatGPT to their heart's content afterwards. So they could use it for, to have it check their grammar, to check their spelling, to maybe to upgrade it from an 8th grade level to a high school level, or whatever they wanted. They could have it modify in any way, but they had to write it first, and then they could use the bot. And the 4th group, they were tasked with only using the bot. They could do any prompts they wanted, as many prompts as they wanted, but ultimately they had to copy and paste it and could not make any changes. And then we took those 4 papers, gave it to the opposite class of the grade level. There's 2 classes per grade level, so they flipped. And they just had to read through the papers and rank them, which one they thought was the best work, not whether they thought it was human or bot, regardless of that, what produced the highest quality work. And interestingly, almost across the board, not 100% across the board, but pretty darn close to it, the human written papers outperformed the bot written papers. In fact, typically the entirely bot written papers tended to do the worst. And there's a number of reasons. There's a lot. We could really dig into the whys of it. And there's a lot of different elements of, why the bot written paper. Is it just that ChatGPT couldn't do it? Is it because they weren't using the right prompts? Is it because they, just sort of like we talked about a little earlier, if it is really easy, do they just take the easy way out and say it looks good enough? Did they even really read through their own essays? I don't know. You know what I mean? So there's a lot that we could dig into with it. But the net result was across the board, students tend to prefer or think that the student-written essays, as in the entirely student-written essays and the pre-group, where they used ChatGPT, but then they still wrote it themselves, they tended to think it was better.
So the post group was the third.
Post group came in third, and one of the reasons for that is it was entirely human-written, but then they would put it in, they'd say, hey, correct my grammar. Now, when it corrects grammar, it's not just finding a grammar mistake and correcting it. It basically rewrote it. Ultimately, what they came to the conclusion, this was when we were reflecting and such, was there's a vast difference between saying, find me my grammar mistakes, identify my grammar mistakes, and versus correct my grammar.
Yeah.
Identifying grammar mistakes was sort of like grammar check in Google Docs, or like handing it to a parent or a tutor and saying, can you proofread this? Whereas correct it, my grammar mistakes, was more like saying, hey, take this and punch it up for me.
Thank you, teacher Steve Dembo, for talking about that experiment you did with the students in your Illinois classroom. As you consider AI, think about appropriate experiments you can do in your classroom with artificial intelligence. Currently, my ninth graders are generating 5-paragraph essays about a topic that they understand well. It could be football, cheerleading, soccer, Minecraft, or anything where they consider that they are an expert. And they are critiquing the quality and comparing and contrasting the output from ChatGPT versus Claude versus Microsoft Copilot versus Perplexity.ai and Google Gemini. I want them to understand the flaws of AI, and I also want them to understand they must have knowledge in an area in order to use AI as a supportive tool. Today's show is sponsored by mirrortalk.ai by Swivel. That's MIRROR, mirrortalk.ai. This incredible verbal reflection tool for students uses AI to respond in a way that will help coach my students on the task at hand. Whether they are building websites or working on teams, the feedback helps me see where students are and coaches them to higher levels of performance. Go to coolcatteacher.com/mirrortalk now to sign up for your free 60-day trial. Now back to our show. Next, we're going to talk to Professor Laurel Aguilar-Kirchhoff, named by the International Society of Technology Educators in 2023 as one of their 20 to watch. And she's going to talk about how she's adjusting her assignments for the teachers of English language learners from episode 856 of the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. How to prevent AI cheating, integrity in the AI age. Do you feel like kids are using AI?
Yes, completely, all the time, pretty much it's just everywhere. And yes, it's the problem for all teachers right now. It doesn't matter what you're teaching, it's what they're turning in. They're using AI, and I don't blame them. I don't blame the students for using AI. On some of my assignments, I went back and I was looking at them and I'm like, of course they would write with AI on this. What do I really want them to get out of this assignment?
Yeah.
And I need to make some changes.
And AI has some common words, like, because I've seen them. Like the one I've seen is delve. You've noticed some common words that like say, hey, AI wrote this.
Foster, tapestry. Oh my gosh. Weaving a tapestry of collaborate. Oh my gosh. If I read that one more time, I'm like, okay, that's just AI. Come on. No one writes like that or consistently writes like that.
Exactly. What'd you do for a midterm in one of your classes?
Well, because I was getting so frustrated with just getting these AI generated responses from my students, I just decided I'm not going to assign an essay for their midterm. This is for secondary teachers teaching English language learners. So I did this complete overhaul. I had them create a storyboard of themselves telling a story of them as a teacher and incorporating the SEDI strategies and all of the different strategies for themselves as an English language learner teacher. They could use whatever ed tech platform to create the storyboard. But my students were so upset. They wanted to write an essay. And I was like, no, I want you to authentically tell me about your journey as a teacher working with English language learners. And let's do this differently.
So let me get this straight. They wanted to write an essay.
They wanted to write an essay. Or
they said, why can't we write an essay instead of this?
Exactly. And I was like,
and you've never heard that. You've never heard them say, I want to write an essay.
I have never heard my students ever in 25 years of teaching ask me to write an essay instead of a project. And they were like, come on, Kirchhoff, just let us write this essay. And I was like, no, we're going to do something creative. And I think that the outcome was really better. And I was so excited about this project. It aligned better to my learning intentions and my success criteria for what I really needed them to demonstrate for their knowledge. I needed them to demonstrate, all of these different points, and they could do this in a creative way. But it really helped with my grading because instead of sitting there and grading all of these essays, I used a single point rubric. I had identified the criterion that I really needed them to demonstrate. I shared that rubric with them. We went through and then we did a student, showcase. And so they were able to talk to each other and give feedback, personalized feedback. They worked on their speaking and listening skills, which are huge for teachers that are working with English language learners. It's good for all students. In the end, the project really was aligned better to what I needed them to demonstrate than them writing an essay and regurgitating back to me the philosophy and the techniques that, they can just read about in their book.
So you feel like that what you got from them was better than if you had given them an essay and they'd actually written it themselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
See, that's what we've got to get to, because a lot of the essays and the discussion forums, that weekly discussion forum posts that educators have been using, they don't work. They're not really, really reflecting. And half the time, people aren't really, really checking them. Like, it's such a waste of time to do those discussion forum posts in so many ways.
So I actually flipped that as well. I changed that so they're not writing it on their own. They're actually doing the discussion forum live in class.
Oh,
so they're doing the reading. They can bring their notes, and then it was an easy flip for me. I basically did a flipped classroom. I said, okay, you're going to do the reading at home. You're going to do the notes at home, and you're going to come in and do the discussion live. And then if I'm grading the discussion posts, I grade it in real time and they get personalized feedback immediately.
Oh, what a great thing. Okay, so let's talk about one other controversial issue, because, and I get really angry. You may get angry on this too.
Okay.
This whole idea about AI detectors. Like, I feel like educators are destroying relationship with children because they flat out don't work, right?
Right. They don't work. And I do get very frustrated with AI detectors because, number one, plagiarism was not invented with AI.
Right.
Like, it's been around. So these AI detectors and these gotcha moments, like I'm going to run it through and I'm going to catch you in this. And then what? I think proactivity and talking to our students about creating our own work, talking about intellectual property, talking about plagiarism, talk about what's the difference, how can we use AI and our sources responsibly to help inspire our creativity to be something that we can use. But how are we actually, if we're just using AI detectors as a gotcha moment, I 100% Number one, it's a waste of our time as teachers. Number two, I think, like you said, it just absolutely destroys that relationship between the teacher and the student. My friend Katie McNamara and I do a session on AI ethics, and we talk about there's a cycle of trust. There's a cycle of ethical and responsibility between the student and the teacher. And it is a cycle. It goes around and around and around. And when we start playing these gotcha moments and using AI detectors, which don't work as an arbitrary, this happened to my son, and it completely eroded his relationship with his teacher. It was, if your essay comes back, I run it through the generator and it comes back as quote unquote more than 30% AI, I'm taking 30% off your grade. That inspired fear in my son as a learner. And he wrote the essay and now he's running it through and seeing like, what's my percentage? Instead of working with his essay to improve the quality of his writing and his thesis and looking for the ways it was a gotcha game. And so he's like, okay, Mom, I wrote this, but I need you to read it and we need to run it through and then what about our students that don't have parents that can help them with that, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the understanding? And then what are we doing? Are we teaching our students, or are we catching our students?
Talked about AI detectors and this whole thing you and I are discussing with a bunch of teachers. And I had a teacher come up to me crying, and she said, listen, I had a class in college just a few years ago I was really trying to do well in. And so I struggled with writing, and I went to the writing lab and I revised and I did all this and I turned in the paper. I was so proud of myself because I knew it was an A. And the professor wrote on it, see me, didn't even give me a grade. So I went and saw the professor, and the professor, there's no way you wrote this. She's like, I wrote it. So she brought in the guy from the writing lab who helped her. And the guy says, she wrote this. I watched her write it. The professor went and wrote a B- on the paper and said, no matter what either of you say, there's no way you wrote this paper. I'm giving you a B-. And she said she almost dropped out of college because she was so destroyed because she gave everything to that. And she felt like she was stuck forever in one lane because nobody believed her. And all the kids are so afraid. Back when ChatGPT came out, I had in all these quote detectors, I had a senior in my class actually take an essay he wrote from 9th grade and run it through AI detectors. And all of them said that it was written by AI, and it wasn't. That thing was written 4 years before, not by AI. And AI said it wrote it because he was a fantastic writer. So now we have this fake game of everybody writing something themselves, running it through the AI detector and trying to figure out how to change it so it doesn't look like it's written by AI. Like, what on earth? This is ridiculous.
And it's such a waste of our time as educators. It's funny. At the end of last semester, I was working with my students, and we were working on a project. And I said, this piece of it, go ahead and use AI for this piece. Like, it just works smarter, not harder. Mm-hmm. And they were shocked. And they were like, wait a second, you're the first professor that we've ever had that said, yeah, use AI. And I said, well, I'm not telling you to use AI for all of it. And I modeled it for them. Mm-hmm. I showed them, at the time I was using ChatGPT. Now I have, my collection that I use for different things. And I thought, okay, we have to teach our students explicitly how to use AI responsibly. Yes. When, where, how, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And if we're not having those lessons and we're just playing a gotcha game, then I think we're really doing a disservice to our students, but also to ourselves. Yeah. Because what is our time worth? Mm-hmm. I'd rather take that time and redesign my lesson and, make it un-ChatGPT-able or whatever, and AI. Or just think about really teacher clarity. What's our learning intention? What's our success criteria? What's the purpose of this assignment? And how are they going to demonstrate their knowledge? What's the point?
Well, and educators we're professionals. And when an educator is frustrated and they know that AI is being used, I believe them. AI is being used, and they know that their students are stealing an education from themselves. So let's acknowledge everyone has a reason to be upset and frustrated and take action.
I'm upset. I'm frustrated.
Yeah, exactly. The frustration is real.
Yeah.
And it's not a quick fix of, well, let's just detect it. Now for a short break from our sponsor of today's show, mirrortalk.ai. That's MIRROR, mirrortalk.ai. As we talk about AI in today's show, you'll want to test this fantastic reflection tool with your students. This tool not only measures students' understanding and zone of proximal development, it also provides insights on their mindset and tone. When I tested it with my students, they were actually amazed at the feedback it gave them on their collaborative work and how it encouraged them to have a positive mindset about working with others in a big, massive Google Doc. mirrortalk.ai is the AI tool that I'm using for AI reflections. So go to coolcatteacher.com/mirrortalk to sign up for a free 60-day trial today. Now, back to the show. AI detectors don't work, but as teachers, parents, and policymakers, we need to know what does work. So let's talk to another one of ISTE's 2023 Top 20 to Watch and author of Elevate Equity in EdTech about some positive uses of AI tools in the classroom. This is episode 859, How to Use AI to Promote Equity Now, with Victoria Thompson. One of the things you say is that we can use AI to promote equity. And, so many people have said, don't use AI because it has bias. It perpetuates bias. It perpetuates bias. You have a different perspective. Could you tell us about it?
I do. In the book, I thought I would be remiss if I didn't call out how AI could also, again, elevate equity in ed tech. So when a lot of people think about artificial intelligence in education, especially because I operate in the K through 12 space and also in the higher ed space as an adjunct professor at a college down here in Central Florida, a lot of people just don't even want to have those conversations about the equity because they're more focused on academic integrity, cheating, what does that look like? But in my lens, the artificial intelligence that I utilize to have that equitable aspect within my classes is, okay, so we're using speech to text. That's artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
We are using translators in the classroom. That's artificial intelligence. We are doing ink to text for mathematics, for, different types of language. That is artificial intelligence. So these things don't operate in a vacuum. And I think that sometimes people believe that they do. We've been using artificial intelligence, honestly, for a very long time. Even when I use speech to text to dictate my emails, that's artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
If I am utilizing, various types of features within like forms to generate questions, that's artificial intelligence. So I focus less on like the ChatGPT, the OpenAI, that stuff, and more on the, hey, here are tools you're already utilizing that are giving students equitable opportunities within artificial intelligence. Now, not to minimize that there could be bias and some challenges with using AI in the classroom, but I think that really just gives us an opportunity to explore and learn a little bit more and not throw our hands up and say, okay, we're done. We're not going to utilize this, but really figure out what we can do to make more equitable outcomes and situations.
As we're recording this, there's the Meta AI that's come out with Llama, which is in the background, all these names, right? As I work with students, it's like, I want them to understand that you can now communicate with anybody, anywhere.
Yes.
And how can you do that? And what are the tools that let you do that? I'm getting ready for an international trip. And so I'm making sure all my translator apps are up to date and my word lens and all the artificial intelligence tools that let me communicate with people in another country when most of the people don't speak English.
Exactly.
Those are powerful. Well, and could we argue that people who don't know how to use these tools, that we're doing people a disservice and we're not making them the kind of people that can include people of other languages?
I just released an article on Edutopia about like 5 ways to support reluctant learners with artificial intelligence. There are valid reasons as to why people might not want to dive into artificial intelligence. There's like the data privacy policy, tool side. But the majority of the educators that I interact with in my circles are concerned about job security. They are concerned about academic integrity. So it's kind of tale of two cities, right? But the big thing is we have to get ahead of this, because if you don't, it's going to be very challenging to dial it back. And I don't mean get ahead as in like it's a gotcha, like, oh, by the way, we're using AI now. Getting ahead of it means that we're understanding what artificial intelligence is. We are looking into the future of really how this is going to revolutionize technology in education. We have students that are already using these tools. We have educators who are already using these tools. And if you're not at the forefront of understanding what these tools do, then you're kind of behind. And I always have concerns, right? Of, maybe if someone's deploying 20 tools at once and they're just kind of trying everything. Like, I have empathy for people who are just diving in head first but don't know where to begin. But I struggle when I hear people say I don't even want to learn about it, because it's already here, and there's a very solid chance that you're probably already using it in some capacity. So then the question becomes, how much do you want to learn, and how do you want to implement it?
Now we've talked about some positive uses, but there are understandably some big concerns with AI, specifically something we call the Eliza effect. Let's talk to Tom Mullaney, special education teacher and instructional designer, about his concern on AI ethics.
The biggest harms or concerns about AI are bias, inaccuracy, environmental degradation, plagiarism, theft from artists, umpteen things. I was looking at this from a pedagogical standpoint. A big use case that's been suggested for education is the AI guest speaker, meaning you take a ChatGPT or a Gemini, and you as the teacher lead the class in a discussion with that chatbot, and you prompt the chatbot to take the role of a deceased person or even of a concept such as the water cycle. Mm-hmm. My concerns about that are, well, there's a basic concern, I think, about one, giving voice to the dead. I think there's a little ickiness there. And two, the AI industry is a very white male-dominated space. For an AI chatbot to replicate the voice of deceased members of marginalized communities sounds very problematic to me. But the pedagogical thing is there's this thing called the Eliza effect. The Eliza effect is the tendency of humans to intuit human characteristics on text-generating computers. And those characteristics can include trust. They can include credibility. And then when you pair that with two things, the known biases and known inaccuracies of large language models, I think you're walking into a pedagogical minefield with the AI guest speaker. And I know this is a popular approach. I've seen it in numerous places. I've been told that, well, it's just like a real guest speaker. You can do the prompts beforehand. On Wednesday, I'll do the dry run. And then Thursday, I'll know exactly what to expect. The problem there is that large language models are stochastic parrots. What they say one day is not what they will say the next.
That's right.
So the dry run does not help you there.
I think the Eliza effect is important. And there's even other things of, let's take kids who have special needs and give them their own personal chatbot that they name. Let's manifest human care. Of course, artificial intelligence imitates humans. That's what it does. It imitates humans, but it's not a human. And I really stress with my students, we don't call it a he or a she. It's an it. It's a tool. It supports us, and it has to have its proper role. But when you start saying training a chatbot to show empathy and become part of someone's life, I mean, there are documented cases of, an AI chatbot tool that was saying it loved people, and then the owners updated it because they knew that was a problem. And then hearts were broken all over the internet. I mean, I have a Washington Post article that says that, because we as humans, when we're interfacing with a text-based tool, we human characteristics and think that it's sentient and has a soul, when it absolutely is just a tool, like you said, parroting.
A couple things to be wary of there. One, when you enter a prompt into ChatGPT, Gemini, and for example, if it can't reply to your prompt, it will say, I can't reply. It chooses I. The other thing, I'm hearing this a lot, people saying that within a few years, AI is going to have values and beliefs, and it's not. I talked about AGI and the singularity, the idea that computers will be as intelligent or more intelligent than humans. This is completely theoretical. It is no proof of it. And I have everyone from Noam Chomsky to Dr. Emily Bender to Dr. Gary Marcus saying that if that happens, well, I think at least one of those people would say that won't happen. But if that ever happens, Chomsky says the first glimmers of sunlight of that dawn are not yet on the horizon. Like, this is not what it's going to be.
As we talk about ethics, we need to mention the importance of diversity in computer science education. So we'll finish up with an interview with Omar Shepherd, an educator from California, from episode 860 of my podcast, The 10-Minute Teacher.
I would say AI is one of those areas that, while it's not new, as a result of new developments such as with ChatGPT, it's really began to proliferate to speak around its utility in edu spaces. And I'll definitely say one of the things we've been doing here in San Bernardino has been working with educators to demystify AI. In other words, to say that AI is not magic, it's actually machine learning. Curriculum developed by MIT K-12 can support all students in engaging in some lessons to help them to develop a foundational understanding around AI and to be able to see how AI can be a tool utilized that they can absolutely engage with. One of the interesting data points gathered in my collaboration with an advocacy organization, CS for CA, that's Computer Science for California, and looking at their data tool. It's a tool that can allow you to search by any district in the state of California, any specific school, to really look at what does the enrollment of who's taking core computer science classes at their schools look like. And you begin to review some striking statistics. As an average, I would say, you would notice that females and underrepresented groups such as Latinx communities, African American communities are by and large completely at significantly lower levels as it relates to who's actually taking on computer science courses. You would find often you'll have Asian and Caucasian, predominantly males, filling many of these computer science courses. But when you look at the realities of that thing that we just talked about earlier, the impacts of computing, who codes matters. And ensuring that you don't enter into a space where this notion of algorithmic bias emerges, you have to ensure that all students are being given an opportunity, A, to be exposed to this learning opportunity, but then B, to be able to access those careers that can allow them to join those teams to be able to contribute to the programming. There's a famous video out there. It's many years old, and I invite someone to look it up if they're interested. And it's titled, HP Computers Are Racist. Now, the computers really aren't racist. What happened was there were two employees in a Radio Shack. One of the employees was much more fairer skinned, was really enjoying this new camera that had been developed that had the ability to track the subject and to be able to be utilized as a really engaging video feature. And they are just really loving it. And they call over their colleague, hey, come check this out. This camera is so cool. Well, the colleague happened to be African American of darker skin. And as they got in front of the camera, they realized, hey, hold on, this camera's not following me. It's not tracking me. It doesn't seem that it's working. It seems like HP computers are racist. Well, in fact, what happened was the development team working to design that actual camera only had fairer skin or Asian males being used in the model. So as a result of that, even though other persons of different colored skin might be able to get in front of the camera, it wasn't reacting in the same way. And that's why it's important for us to think about this idea around giving more students an opportunity to be accessing computer science education. Here in California, as of 2018, we actually have K-12 computer science standards. And our standards open up to say that all students can learn computer science and all teachers can teach computer science. We know that all students aren't going to become programmers. Rather, we know that as a result of the intersectionality of computing in all subject areas, it's an opportunity for students to engage in learning that's meaningful and prepares them for tomorrow.
So let's have some tech tips. First of all, one of the most important things that I teach my students is how to use AI in support of learning something new. So for example, when I teach my AP Computer Science Principles class, sometimes my students struggle with understanding the difference between parameters and arguments. I will have them go into the AI tool of their choice and say, I do not understand parameters and arguments, but I do understand, and they will put in football or cheerleading or soccer or Minecraft or fashion or whatever it is they're interested in. Please explain parameters and arguments to me in a way I can understand. What we'll do is we will compare explanations and determine which is the best explanation. The second tip is to use a tool like Perplexity.ai and teach students to go to the original sources and not take things secondhand, but from some sort of generative tool that we don't know how it is trained. Third, one of the most useful things about artificial intelligence is I often program custom GPTs relating to a project. I'll put it on my phone and hand it around the classroom and let students use it to get feedback on a project that I can fully monitor. Now, some of the tools that teachers really like, one of them is Brisk Teaching. It's a Chrome add-in. It can do so many different things. It can also help you create basic presentations. It can get you there about 80 to 90% of the way there and then add additional content. Second thing Brisk Teaching does, Google Docs replay. So it replays the edits, the cuts, and the pastes and that sort of thing. Fourth, the generative AI question generation for things like YouTube videos that's built into Google Classroom or Edpuzzle or other tools. I also like generative question banks. So for example, I had created a quiz in one of the quizzing programs about how Google Classroom worked. So I was able to take that and turn it into a different set of questions with real world examples. Finally, I have over 250 pages of AP Computer Science Principles. Well, I like to access it with my favorite tool for using PDFs, Microsoft Copilot. As I'm talking to Copilot about content, I might need a standard. It will actually converse with me, pulling information from that PDF and giving me page numbers so that I can click on those and go to the page numbers. The show notes for this episode are at coolcatteacher.com talk AI. That's coolcatteacher.com/talk AI. Now, as we finish, I was at a major company's unveiling of their new AI product. And one of the questions they asked those of us in the room was, how can we make this particular product a better teacher? You know what? That question really bothered me. Nobody would ever say, how can we make AI a better mom or dad? How can we make AI a better principal? How can we make AI a better CEO? How dare you say, how can we make AI a better teacher? People who say that sort of thing do not understand what a true teacher does. Excellent teachers are artisans. We have relationships. You have to relate to educate. Now, can I use artificial intelligence to help teach specific parts of content? Absolutely. But be a teacher? I don't think so. One thing I always tell my teachers is you have to innovate like a turtle. I know that all of this going on can seem so overwhelming, but truthfully, I've been teaching 23 years now. And when I finally said, I can't do everything, but I can try something new once a week, I can innovate like a turtle. That's when my teaching was transformed by both technology, but also just the exciting things that I was learning. I just want to encourage you, as you've listened today, pick one or two things that you can apply, but just pick something small and innovate like a turtle today. And I want you to remember that what we do in our classrooms today is the present we give tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in and talking about teaching.
Visit coolcatteacher.com for the latest tips and trends everywhere you connect. See you later, educators.
Thank you for tuning in to this first episode of Cool Cat Teacher Talk. This show is made possible by our sponsor, mirrortalk.ai. Go to coolcatteacher.com/mirrortalk. That's coolcatteacher.com/MIRROR talk to start your free 60-day trial. Personally, I recommend that you use MirrorTalk as a wonderful professional development tool for teachers, as a reflection station for college students, or exit tickets with your K-12 students. Everyone will be intrigued by the feedback they receive after completing their verbal reflections, breaking down their understanding, mindset, and tone. And my favorite part is that the AI is specifically designed to provide feedback in a way that is helpful to the student, but not overly empathetic. That's important when you're working with AI, of course. My students felt like they were learning, and I also saw an immediate improvement in the collaborative work my students were doing. So what are you waiting for? Check out mirrortalk.ai by Swivel today. Just go to coolcatteacher.com/mirrortalk to get started now. Thank you, mirrortalk.ai, for sponsoring this first episode of Cool Cat Teacher Talk. And thank you, everyone, for listening.